They say money can't buy happiness, but it can certainly buy the right to treat people like trash. I knew that better than anyone as I scrubbed the marble floor of the Grand Sol Hotel, the smell of lemon detergent stinging my nose. I was invisible, until a pair of polished Italian leather shoes stopped right in front of my face. My hands froze on the rough sponge. I knew those shoes. I knew the arrogant stance, the slight tap of the toe that indicated impatience. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach, heavier than the debt that had forced me onto my knees in this lobby. Slowly, I lifted my gaze, past the sharp crease of midnight blue trousers, past the silk tie, all the way up to the sneering face of Aiden. He wasn't alone. Clinging to his arm like a decorative accessory was a woman dripping in diamonds, her nose wrinkled in distaste as she looked down at me. "Monica?" Aiden's voice was smooth, loud enough to draw attention from the nearby concierge. He sounded delighted, but I knew the cruelty lurking beneath. "I heard you dropped out of design school, but I didn't realize you'd fallen quite this far." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "I'm working, Aiden. Please move." "Working?" He laughed, a hollow sound that echoed off the high ceilings. "Is that what you call this? You always did belong in the dirt, didn't you? Even when we were together, I could smell the poverty on you." My grip on the sponge tightened until my knuckles turned white. "Excuse me," I muttered, trying to shift to the left to continue cleaning. "Oops," Aiden said. With a casual flick of his expensive shoe, he kicked my plastic bucket hard. It tipped over with a splash, sending gray, soapy water flooding across the pristine marble I had just spent 20 minutes polishing. The dirty liquid soaked into the knees of my uniform instantly. Welcome back to Evie's Mafia romance collections. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our little dark romance family stretch across cities, countries, and time zones. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you leave here helps us keep unraveling these dangerous love stories and high-stakes betrayals together. So, find your quiet place, dim the lights, and get ready. Let's begin. The cold water seeped through my pants, chilling my skin, but my face burned with humiliation. The dirty puddle expanded rapidly, inching toward the fiancé's open-toed heels. She shrieked, jumping back as if the water were acidic. "Aiden, look what she did," the woman cried out, pointing a manicured finger at me. "She almost ruined my Jimmy Choos." "Clumsy," Aiden tutted, shaking his head with mock disappointment. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a few crumpled bills, tossing them into the soapy mess. They floated there, soggy and pathetic. "Here, buy yourself some dignity, Monica. Or maybe a new rag. You look like you need both." Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, hot and angry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the wet sponge at his perfect face. But I couldn't. I needed this job. My parents' medical bills were piling up on the kitchen counter, and this hotel paid better than anywhere else in Seoul. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted iron. I lowered my head, reaching for the tipped bucket. "I'll clean it up, sir." "Make sure you do," Aiden sneered. "And make it spotless. I have important guests arriving." Thunder rumbled outside, shaking the glass walls of the lobby, mirroring the storm inside my chest. But then, the automatic doors slid open, and the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The ambient chatter of the hotel guests died out. The air grew heavy, charged with a sudden terrifying electricity. A group of men walked in. They moved in a V formation, silent and synchronized, wearing suits that cost more than my parents' house. But it was the man at the center who sucked the oxygen out of the room. He was tall, with broad shoulders that strained against his black suit jacket. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that seemed carved from cold marble. His eyes were sharp, devoid of warmth, scanning the room like a predator assessing a hunting ground. Lim Sung-won, the Shadow King of Seoul. I had seen him in magazines, usually in articles speculating about his ruthless business acquisitions or the darker rumors of his underground empire. Seeing him in person was different. It was like standing next to a tiger that had just decided it was hungry. Aiden didn't notice the silence immediately. He was too busy enjoying my misery. He nudged my shoulder with his foot again. "Well, chop chop, Monica. Don't make me call the manager." That was when Lim Sung-won stopped. He was 10 feet away heading for the elevators, but he paused. His dark eyes flicked from the spilled water to the floating money, then to Aiden's smirk, and finally they landed on me. For a second, the world stopped. I felt exposed, pathetic, a girl on her knees in a puddle of dirty water. I expected him to look away in disgust. Instead, his gaze hardened. The temperature in the lobby seemed to drop 10 degrees. He changed course, walking straight toward us. His footsteps were heavy, deliberate, echoing like gunshots on the marble. Aiden turned, sensing the presence behind him. His smirk faltered when he saw who it was. "Mr. Lim? I didn't expect to see you here. I'm Aiden Park, from the K-Tech merger. We met at the..." Lim didn't even blink. He walked right past Aiden as if he were a ghost, stepping directly into the puddle of soapy water. He didn't care about his shoes. He towered over me, his shadow falling across my face, blocking out the harsh hotel lights. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was I in the way? Was he going to fire me himself? Lim stared down at me, his expression unreadable, intense. Then he looked at the bucket. He looked at the crumpled money floating in the suds. "Pick it up," Lim said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth like velvet wrapped around a blade. Aiden scrambled. "Exactly. I told her to pick it up, Mr. Lim. The staff here is so incompetent." "Not her," Lim said, finally turning his head to look at Aiden. His eyes were dead calm, which made them terrifying. "You." Aiden blinked, his face losing all color. "Excuse me? Pick up your money," Lim commanded softly. "And the bucket." But..." Aiden stammered, looking at his fiancée, then at the onlookers. "I'm a guest. She's the maid." Lim took one step closer to Aiden. The menace rolling off him was suffocating. "I don't repeat myself." Trembling, Aiden knelt. His face burned bright red as he fished the soggy bills out of the dirty water and set the bucket upright. The humiliation was absolute. He stood up quickly, wiping his hands on his pants, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Lim turned his back on him immediately, dismissing him as a threat. He looked down at me again. The terrifying coldness in his eyes vanished for a split second, replaced by something intense, something possessive. He extended a hand toward me. It was large, the palm calloused, a warrior's hand disguised in a businessman's suit. I hesitated, my hands dripping with gray water. "Sir, I'm dirty. I'll ruin your suit." He didn't withdraw. He stepped between me and Aiden, creating a wall of black fabric and power. He looked at Aiden with cold eyes, then pulled me up from the floor, his grip firm and warm, ignoring the filth on my uniform. "Leave the bucket," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You have a new job now." The silence in the lobby was heavier than the water bucket had been. As Lim Sung-won guided me toward the exit, the air felt vacuum-sealed. My uniform was still sodden, clinging uncomfortably to my legs, heavy with dirty water and shame, but for the first time in my life, no one was looking at the stain. They were looking at him, and by extension, they were forced to look at me. I could feel Aiden's gaze burning into my back, a mix of confusion, fury, and terror. Just minutes ago, I had been an insect he could crush beneath his designer shoe. Now, I was walking away under the protection of a titan. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I turned around, I was afraid the illusion would shatter, and I'd be back on my knees scrubbing the floor. The automatic doors slid open, and the humidity of the rainy Seoul afternoon hit me. But I didn't get wet. A bodyguard had already snapped open a large black umbrella, holding it over Lim and me as we descended the stairs to the waiting line of cars. Get in, Lim said. It wasn't a request. A sleek black Maybach pulled up to the curb like a shark gliding through dark water. The rear door was opened for me. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. My mother had taught me never to get into cars with strangers, especially dangerous ones, but the alternative was going back to the lobby to face Aiden. I ducked my head and slid onto the back seat. The door thudded shut, sealing us inside. The silence of the outside world was instantly cut off. The drumming of the rain against the roof was just a distant whisper. The air inside the car was different, filtered, cool, and expensive. The smell of lemon detergent and wet dog that had clung to me vanished, replaced by the rich, earthy scent of premium leather and something else. Sandalwood and cedar. It was Lim's scent. It was masculine, clean, and overpowering. I squeezed myself against the door, trying to keep my wet uniform from touching the pristine beige leather seats. I was shivering, partly from the cold water soaking my skin, but mostly from pure adrenaline. Lim Sung sat on the other side of the spacious cabin. He didn't look at me. He was looking out the tinted window, watching the city blur past as the car accelerated smoothly into traffic. He took out a phone, tapped a few messages, and then slid it into his suit pocket. Minutes ticked by. The silence stretched until it felt like a physical weight on my chest. Panic began to claw at my throat. Where was he taking me? Was this a rescue? Or had I just traded a public humiliation for a private nightmare? Men like Lim Sung didn't help maids out of the goodness of their hearts. There was always a cost. Where are we going? I finally whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't answer immediately. He reached into the leather pocket of the seat in front of him and pulled out a slim black tablet. He unlocked it and extended it toward me without turning his head. Read, he said. I took the device, my fingers leaving damp smudges on the screen. I looked down, and my breath hitched. It was a picture of me. Not a posed photo, but a candid shot taken from across the street while I was walking to the bus stop last week. I swiped the screen. My name, my date of birth, my high school grades, the date I dropped out of the fashion design program at Seoul National University. I swiped again. A scan of a bank statement. My parents' bank statement. Outstanding balance, 234 million won, approximately 200,000 US dollars. How? I looked up at him, horror replacing the fear. How do you have this? This is private. Privacy is a luxury for those who can afford it, Lim said, finally turning to face me. His eyes were dark voids, devoid of empathy but filled with terrifying intelligence. Your father's heart surgery. Your mother's failing bakery. You dropped out to work 3 jobs to pay the interest, but you're barely making a dent. In 3 months, the bank takes the house. In 6 months, they take the bakery. I felt naked. He had stripped me down faster than Aiden ever could. Aiden mocked my poverty. Lim Sung had analyzed it, quantified it, and put it on a spreadsheet. What do you want? I asked, my voice hardening. If you think I can pay you back for saving me back there, you have the wrong person. I have nothing. I don't want your money, Monica, he said smoothly. I have enough money to buy this city 3 times over. I want your time. My time? I need a wife. The words hung in the air, absurd and heavy. I blinked, sure I had misheard. Excuse me? My grandfather, the chairman, is dying, Lim stated, as if discussing the weather. The board of directors is pushing for a vote of no confidence. They believe I am too unstable to lead the syndicate and the corporation alone. Traditionalists. They want a family man. A stable man. If I am not married by my 32nd birthday, which is in 2 weeks, my inheritance is frozen, and control passes to my uncle. He leaned forward slightly, the scent of sandalwood intensifying. I do not like my uncle. I shook my head, trying to process the insanity of it. So hire an actress. Hire a model. Why me? You don't know me. I'm a maid. Precisely, he said. I don't need a socialite who will ask questions. I don't need a partner who wants to discuss feelings or share a bed. And most importantly, he paused, his gaze drifting to my hands which were still clenched into fists on my lap. I saw you back there, he continued, his voice dropping an octave. When that boy kicked the bucket, when he insulted you. You didn't cry. You didn't beg. You wanted to kill him. I stiffened. I saw the way your jaw tightened, Lim said softly. I saw the hate in your eyes. It was pure. It was beautiful. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a gold fountain pen. He tapped the tablet screen. I don't need a woman who loves me, Monica. Love makes people weak. It makes them hesitate. I need a woman who has enough hate in her heart to survive my world. You have fire. I can use that fire. He pressed a button on the armrest, and a partition slid up, separating us from the driver. The deal is simple, he said. 1 year. You wear my ring. You live in my house. You attend events on my arm and pretend to adore me. In exchange, I clear your parents' debt today. All of it. Plus a monthly allowance of 10 million won for your personal use. After 365 days, we divorce. You walk away free, with your degree paid for. I looked down at the tablet again. The number glared back at me. 234 million KRW. It was a number that was slowly killing my father. It was a number that had stolen my dreams. And with one signature, this stranger was offering to erase it. But the cost. To belong to the Shadow King. What if I say no? I asked. Then I stop the car, Lim said simply. You get out in the rain. You go back to cleaning floors. And in 3 months your parents lose their home. It wasn't a threat. It was just a fact. He was boxing me in, using my own desperation as the walls. I looked at him, really looked at him. He was handsome, yes, but dangerous. There was a darkness in him that frightened me. But when I thought of Aiden's laugh, when I thought of my mother crying over the bills at the kitchen table, I took the gold pen from his hand. The metal was warm from his touch. 1 year, I said, my voice barely a whisper. 1 year, he confirmed. My hand shook as I signed the digital document on the tablet. The stylus glided across the glass, signing away my freedom. Monica Green. As soon as I finished, Lim took the tablet back. He tapped the screen once. Done. The transfer has been initiated. Your parents are debt-free. Just like that. My life's greatest burden. Gone with a tap of a finger. I felt lightheaded, dizzy with relief and terror. The car began to slow down. I looked out the window. We had left the city center. We were winding up a private road up a mountain, surrounded by dense forest. Through the trees, I saw high stone walls topped with security cameras and iron gates that looked heavy enough to stop a tank. Beyond the gates stood a sprawling modern mansion of glass and black steel, perched on the edge of the cliff overlooking the city below. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a fortress. Welcome home, Mrs. Lim, he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. The gates groaned open, and the Maybach rolled into the lion's den. I had sold my soul to the devil to save my family, and now I had to live with him. The heavy front doors swung open silently, revealing a cavernous interior that felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum for the living. The fortress was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all sharp angles, floor-to-ceiling glass, and polished black steel. But it was cold. A chill radiated from the marble floors that went straight through the soles of my wet shoes. Lim walked in first, tossing his umbrella to a waiting butler without looking. I hesitated on the threshold, dripping water onto the pristine entryway. Come, he commanded, not breaking stride. I stepped inside, the echo of my cheap sneakers sounding pathetic against the vast silence. The air smelled of nothing. No cooking, no flowers, no life. Just the sterile, metallic scent of filtered air and money. A line of staff stood at attention, maids in starched gray uniforms and butlers in black. They bowed perfectly as Lim passed, their eyes lowered. As I trailed behind him, I felt their gazes flick up to me. I saw the confusion. I saw the judgment. They saw the wet hair, the cheap uniform, the smell of the hotel lobby clinging to me. I was one of them, yet I was walking through the front door. A young maid near the end of the line, clearly nervous, fumbled with a silver tray she was holding. It tilted, and a crystal tumbler slid off, shattering on the floor. Smash! The sound was like a gunshot. The girl gasped, dropping to her knees instantly, her hands shaking as she reached for the jagged glass. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Master Lim," she cried. Instinct took over. My body moved before my brain could stop it. I dropped to my knees beside her. "It's okay," I said, reaching for a large shard. "Don't touch it with your bare hands, you'll cut yourself. Let me get a broom." "Stop." The word was spoken softly, but it froze the entire room. I looked up. Lim had stopped. He turned slowly, looking down at the two of us kneeling on the floor. The young maid was trembling violently. "Stand up, Monica," Lim said. "She's just scared," I defended, holding the glass shard. "I can help her clean it up. It's just water." I said, "Stand up." His eyes were hard, boring into mine. "You are not a maid. Not anymore. If you kneel only for me. Never for broken glass." He gestured to the head butler. "Clean this mess. And get Mrs. Lim's stylists. She needs to be processed." I stood up slowly, dropping the glass back onto the tray. The separation was immediate and brutal. I wasn't one of them anymore, but I didn't belong to him either. I was in limbo. The next 3 hours were a blur of invasive hands and critical eyes. I was ushered into a dressing room the size of my parents' entire apartment. A team of 4 women descended on me with the efficiency of a pit crew. There was no friendly chatter, no glass of champagne like in the movies. This was a renovation project. They stripped me of my wet clothes, dropping my uniform into a trash bag like it was hazardous waste. I stood naked and shivering as they critiqued my body in hushed, rapid-fire Korean. "Skin is dry, needs exfoliation. Hair is a disaster. Too frizzy. Straighten it. Nails are chipped. Fix them." I was scrubbed raw with salts that smelled of lavender and crushed diamonds. I was waxed, plucked, and polished until I felt like a plastic doll. They painted my face, hiding the dark circles under my eyes, contouring my cheekbones until I looked sharper, meaner. Then came the dress. It was a slip of midnight blue silk, so dark it looked black in the dim light. It fit like a second skin, clinging to my curves and leaving my back entirely exposed. It was beautiful, but it felt heavy. The diamond necklace they fastened around my throat was cold, weighing down on my collarbone like a jeweled shackle. When they finally turned me toward the full-length mirror, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked expensive. She looked dangerous. She looked like she belonged to the Shadow King. "Master Lim is waiting for dinner," the lead stylist said, opening the door. I walked out, the unfamiliar click of stiletto heels echoing in the hallway. I made my way to the grand staircase. Lim was standing at the bottom, checking his phone. He had changed into a fresh suit, charcoal gray, no tie, the top button of his white shirt undone. It was the most relaxed I had seen him, which is to say, he looked like a slightly less tense predator. I took the first step down. He looked up. His hand froze mid-scroll on his phone. He didn't say anything. He didn't smile. He just stared. His dark eyes swept over me, starting from the heels, traveling up the silk dress, lingering on the exposed skin of my shoulder, and finally locking onto my eyes. For a heartbeat, the mask slipped. The cold, calculating CEO vanished, and I saw a flash of raw, masculine hunger. It was intense enough to make my breath hitch. He looked at me not as a contract, but as a possession he suddenly wanted to unwrap. Then, the mask was back. He shoved his phone into his pocket and cleared his throat. Adequate, he said. Adequate? I challenged, gripping the banister. I feel like a prized poodle. You look like a wife, he corrected, extending his arm as I reached the bottom step. Shall we? I hesitated, then looped my arm through his. His bicep was hard as rock beneath the expensive fabric. A jolt of electricity shot through me at the contact. A warning, or perhaps a promise. He led me into the dining room. It was vast, dominated by a table long enough to seat 20 people. He sat at the head, and I was seated at his right hand. Close, but not too close. Dinner was served in silence. Plates of food I couldn't pronounce were placed before us. Tiny portions of fish, foam, and gold leaf. I pushed a piece of scallop around my plate, my appetite gone. Eat, Lim said, cutting his steak with precise surgical movements. I'm not hungry. I am investing a significant amount of capital in you, Monica. I expect you to maintain your health. Eat. I stabbed the scallop and chewed it angrily. It tasted like butter and resentment. We need to establish the ground rules, Lim said, laying down his knife and fork. He picked up his wine glass, the red liquid swirling against the crystal. Rule number 1. Public perception is everything. Outside these walls, we are madly in love. You touch me. You look at me with adoration. If I reach for your hand, you take it. If I kiss you, you kiss me back. Understood? I'm a good actress, I muttered. We shall see, he replied dryly. Rule number 2. In private. We are strangers. You do not ask me about my business. You do not ask where I go at night. You do not enter my study. He took a sip of wine, his eyes narrowing slightly. And finally, rule number 3. The West Wing. He pointed his knife toward the double doors on the far side of the house. That is my private sanctuary. My bedroom, my personal library. You are never to set foot in that wing. You have the East Wing. It has everything you need. Do not cross the threshold. What are you hiding in there? I asked, unable to help myself. Bluebeard's dead wives? Lim didn't laugh. He leaned forward, the candlelight dancing in his dark eyes. I value my solitude, Monica. Do not test me on this. The air between us grew thick, charged with a tension that was partly fear and partly something else, a magnetic pull that I couldn't ignore. He was terrifying, yes, but sitting here in the dim light, watching me with those heavy hooded eyes, he was also devastatingly attractive. I saved you from a life of scrubbing floors, he said softly, his voice dropping to a murmur. But make no mistake. You are in a cage. It may be made of gold, but it is still a cage. He finished his wine in one swallow and stood up abruptly. Your room is the master suite in the East Wing. Sleep well, Mrs. Lim. Tomorrow your training begins. He walked away without looking back, heading straight for the forbidden West Wing. I sat alone at the long table, the silence of the house rushing back in to drown me. I looked down at the diamond necklace reflecting in my wineglass. I had sold my freedom to save my parents. I was safe. I was rich. I was powerful. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Below me, the city of Seoul twinkled like a sea of stars. Somewhere down there, Aiden was sleeping in his luxury apartment. Somewhere down there, my parents were sleeping peacefully for the first time in years. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. I was the queen of the city now. But as I looked at the reflection of the stranger in the midnight blue dress, I realized Lim was right. I was just a bird in a gilded cage, and the door was locked tight. The morning sun over Cheongdam-dong didn't feel like warmth, it felt like a spotlight. I was sitting in the back of another black sedan, an SUV this time, flanked by 2 men who looked less like human beings and more like carved blocks of granite. Mr. Han sat in the front passenger seat, while a man introduced only as Code 4 sat beside me. They hadn't spoken a word since we left the fortress. Their job was ostensibly to protect me, but as we pulled up to the curb of Seoul's most exclusive fashion district, I knew the truth. They weren't just shields, they were leashes. We have arrived, madam, Mr. Han said, his voice gravelly. I winced at the title. Madam, yesterday I was Hey You or Miss Green. Today I was the matriarch of a crime syndicate, sent on a domestic errand to buy a peace offering for an uncle I'd never met. I stepped out onto the pavement. The air here smelled different than the rest of Seoul. It smelled of expensive perfume, freshly roasted artisanal coffee, and exclusion. I smoothed down the front of the cream-colored tweed suit the stylists had forced me into. It was Chanel, vintage, and cost more than my father's car. I felt like a child playing dress-up in a stranger's closet. Stay close, Mr. Han murmured into his earpiece as we moved toward the entrance of Kronos, a high-end watch boutique. The glass door was opened for me by a doorman in white gloves. Inside, the store was hushed, the silence thick and heavy like a blanket. Displays of watches rested on velvet cushions under low golden lighting. There were no price tags. If you had to ask, you didn't belong here. I walked toward a display case in the back, my heels clicking softly on the plush carpet. I needed something traditional. Gold. Flashy enough to appease a grumpy elder, but tasteful enough to represent Lim Sung Wan. I was pointing at a gold Patek Philippe when I heard it. That laugh. It was a sharp, braying sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. My stomach dropped. I froze, my finger hovering over the glass case. I'm telling you, the merger is practically done. I'll be running the division by next quarter. I turned my head slowly, praying I was hallucinating. I wasn't. Aiden was standing near the front counter, leaning casually against the glass. He was wearing a navy suit that was a shade too bright, trying too hard to look like he owned the place. He was with a business associate, an older man who looked bored. I turned back to the display case instantly, my heart hammering against my ribs. Don't see me. Please, don't see me. I wasn't ready. The gala was weeks away. I was supposed to be the queen by then. Right now, I still felt like the maid who had been on her knees in the dirt. Well, Aiden's voice drifted over, dripping with amusement. Is that Monica? The air left my lungs. I stiffened as footsteps approached. I saw Mr. Han shift in my peripheral vision, his hand twitching toward his jacket, but I stayed still. Aiden walked around the display case, blocking my exit. He looked me up and down, his eyes widening slightly at the Chanel suit, then narrowing with a sneer. I almost didn't recognize you, he said, stepping into my personal space. You cleaned up. Did you spend your entire severance pay on one outfit? Or is this a knockoff from the night market? The older man with him chuckled. Who is this, Aiden? Just an old acquaintance, Aiden said dismissively. She used to clean up after me. Literally. He leaned in closer, his cologne cloying and sweet. Nothing like the sharp, woodsy scent of Lim Sung Wan. What are you doing in a place like this, Monica? Aiden lowered his voice to a mock whisper. Are you applying for a job? I heard they need someone to polish the glass. You're good at that. The rage flared in my chest, hot and sudden. It wasn't the sorrow I used to feel when he looked at me with disdain. It was anger, pure, molten anger. I remembered Lim's words in the car. I need a woman with hate in her heart. I looked him in the eye. I'm shopping, Aiden. Go away. He laughed, loudly. Shopping? Here? Monica, look at the price of that watch. That's 50 million won. You couldn't afford the strap. He glanced at Mr. Han and the other bodyguard standing a few feet away. He misread the situation completely. Oh, I see. Aiden smirked, a nasty glint in his eye. You found yourself a sponsor? Someone to pay the bills now that I'm gone? I knew you were desperate, but I didn't think you'd start selling yourself so quickly. Who is he? Some old man who likes charity cases? Mr. Han moved. It was a blur of motion. 1 second he was a statue, the next he was stepping forward, his massive frame blocking out the light. The air in the boutique shifted from quiet luxury to imminent violence. Mr. Han's eyes were locked on Aiden's throat. Aiden flinched, taking a stumbling step back. Whoa, Watch it, pal. Sir, Mr. Han growled, his voice a low rumble. Is this man bothering you? The clerk behind the counter looked terrified. Aiden looked confused, but still arrogant. I'm talking to her, Aiden snapped. Back off. Mr. Han's hand began to rise. I knew what Lim would do. Lim would break his hand. Lim would burn the store down. But I wasn't Lim. Not yet. I remembered the plan. The gala. If I destroyed Aiden now, it would be messy. It would be small. Lim wanted total destruction. He wanted Aiden to know exactly who I was when the knife twisted. Stand down, I said. My voice surprised me. It was cold. Even. It sounded like him. Mr. Han stopped instantly, though his body remained coiled like a spring. He looked at me for confirmation. He's not worth the paperwork, I said, holding Mr. Han's gaze. I turned back to Aiden. He looked rattled, but he was trying to recover his composure in front of his business partner. You should be careful who you hang out with, Monica, Aiden sneered, adjusting his jacket. Thugs don't belong in Cheongdam-dong. Neither do maids. I didn't answer him. I turned to the sales clerk, who was trembling behind the glass. I'll take this one, I said, pointing to the gold Patek Philippe. And the one next to it. Wrap them. The Patek. Miss? The clerk stammered. That is 60 million won. Aiden snorted. She's bluffing. She doesn't have a dime. I reached into my purse. My fingers brushed against the cold metal of the card Lim had given me that morning. It was black titanium, heavy and sleek. The Centurion. I pulled it out and placed it gently on the glass counter. The sound was a heavy clink that echoed in the silence. The clerk's eyes widened to the size of saucers. She looked at the card, then at me, then at the terrified realization that she had been letting Aiden harass a VIP. Immediately, madam, the clerk bowed deeply, practically scraping her nose on the counter. My apologies for the wait. Aiden stared at the card. He couldn't see the name from this angle, but he recognized the color. He recognized the weight. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. How? He whispered. I didn't look at him. I punched in the PIN code Lim had given me. Approved. Let's go, I said to Mr. Han as the clerk handed me the heavy velvet bag with trembling hands. I walked past Aiden without breaking stride. I didn't shoulder check him. I didn't need to. I walked as if he were invisible, as if he were part of the furniture. Mr. Han and the other bodyguard fell into step behind me, creating a flying wedge of intimidation that forced Aiden to press himself against a display case to avoid being trampled. As the doorman opened the exit, I heard Aiden's voice, faint and confused behind me. Monica? I stepped out into the sunlight. My heart was racing, my hands were shaking, but my head was high. I hadn't cried, I hadn't begged. I had crushed him with silence and a piece of black metal. We reached the SUV. Mr. Han opened the door for me. Before he got in the front, he paused on the sidewalk, pulling out his phone. I watched through the tinted glass as he dialed a number. Sir, Mr. Han said, his voice muffled but audible. We had an incident with the subject Aiden Park at the boutique. No, madam handled it, yes, sir. She used the card. Understood. We are returning to base. He hung up and slid into the car. Master Lim says to tell you well done, Mr. Han said, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. For the first time since I entered this terrifying world, a small cold smile touched my lips. I looked down at the velvet bag in my lap. The cage was still a cage, but at least the bars were made of gold, and I was starting to learn how to bite. The house was different the moment I stepped inside. The air was usually filled with the quiet, efficient hum of the staff, the distant clinking of china, the soft tread of shoes on marble. Today, the fortress was silent, dead silent. The SUV drove away, leaving me standing in the foyer holding the velvet bag containing the 60 million won watch. I looked around. No greeters. No maids to take my coat. The vast open space felt like the inside of a held breath. In here. The voice came from the grand living room. It wasn't a shout, but it carried through the house with effortless authority. I walked in. The room was dim, the heavy curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. Lim Sung stood by the fireplace, staring into the unlit hearth. He had shed his jacket and tie. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal thick forearms corded with muscle. In his hand was a tumbler of amber liquid. Whiskey, neat. He didn't turn around when I entered. Mr. Han filed his report, Lim said, his voice low and devoid of emotion. He says you ran into the insect. I tightened my grip on the velvet bag. I did. Han says the insect insulted you. He laughed at you. Lim took a slow sip of his drink, and Han says you let him walk away. I followed the plan, I said, stepping further into the room. My heart was beating fast, not from fear of Aiden anymore, but from the palpable tension radiating off the man in front of me. You said the gala. You said you wanted to destroy him publicly. If I had let Mr. Han break his jaw in a watch store, it would have been a news story, not a tragedy. I waited. Lim finally turned. His face was a mask of cold fury, but his eyes were burning. Strategy, he muttered, swirling the ice in his glass. You are logical. That is good. He set the glass down on the mantelpiece with a heavy clack. But logic doesn't stop the fact that he breathed the same air as you. He looked at you. He spoke to you as if you were beneath him. Lim walked toward me. He moved like a jungle cat, silent, fluid, and lethal. I told you to be a queen, Monica. A queen does not just ignore insects. She crushes them. He stopped 2 feet away from me. The smell of him, whiskey, cedar, and suppressed violence, hit me like a physical wave. I didn't have a weapon, I said, my voice shaking slightly. All I had was a credit card. Then we need to fix that. He grabbed my hand. His grip was hard, possessive. He didn't lead me toward the stairs or the dining room. He pulled me toward a nondescript steel door near the kitchen that I had assumed was a pantry. He swiped his thumb across a biometric scanner. The door hissed open. Come. We descended a spiral concrete staircase. The air grew cooler, smelling of gun oil and cold iron. When we reached the bottom, the lights flickered on automatically, revealing a space that was the polar opposite of the luxury upstairs. It was a private dojo and shooting range. Gray concrete walls, punching bags hanging from chains, a wall of weapons, knives, batons, firearms, displayed like artwork. This was where the Shadow King was made. Lim walked to a metal table and picked up a handgun. It was black, sleek, and terrifying. He checked the chamber, ejected the magazine to show me it was empty, and then held it out to me. Take it. I hesitated. I've never held a gun. Take it, he ordered. I reached out and took the weapon. It was heavier than it looked, the steel cold against my palm. It felt foreign, wrong in my hand. Aiden thinks you are weak, Lim said, walking behind me. He thinks you are the girl who scrubs his floors. He thinks he can kick you, and you will apologize for bruising his foot. Lim moved closer. I could feel the heat of his chest against my back. Aim at the target, he whispered, his voice right next to my ear. I raised the gun, pointing it at the paper silhouette at the far end of the range. My arm wobbled. My stance was awkward. Wrong, Lim murmured. He didn't step away. He moved in, wrapping his body around mine. His left hand slid around my waist, his fingers digging into my hip bone, pulling me back until I was pressed flush against his torso. The contact was electric. I gasped, the air catching in my throat. Feet apart, he commanded, his voice vibrating through my spine. He kicked the inside of my ankle gently with his foot, forcing me to widen my stance. Ground yourself. His right hand moved up my arm, tracing the line of my tricep over my shoulder, and then covering my hand on the grip of the gun. His hand was massive, swallowing mine completely. His skin was rough, calloused, warm. "Relax your shoulders," he whispered. "You are tense." "You make me tense," I breathed, the words escaping before I could stop them. He paused. I felt his chest expand against my back as he took a deep breath. He didn't pull away. If anything, he pressed closer. His chin grazed the top of my head. "Good," he said darkly. "Fear keeps you sharp." He adjusted my grip, his fingers interlacing with mine over the trigger guard. "Imagine it's him," Lim said. "Imagine the silhouette is Aiden. Imagine him laughing at you. Imagine him kicking the bucket over. Imagine him looking at you like you are trash." The image flashed in my mind. The humiliation. The smirk. The water soaking my knees. "Do you feel it?" Lim asked. "The hate?" "Yes," I whispered. "Feed it." He guided my arms, lifting the gun higher. We were moving as one entity now. I could feel the thud of his heart against my back, a slow, heavy rhythm that matched the racing of my own. The line between training and something far more dangerous was vanishing. He leaned in, his face buried in the crook of my neck. I could feel his lips brushing the sensitive skin below my ear. I shivered, my knees going weak, but his arm around my waist held me up like an iron band. "You are not a maid," he growled against my skin. "You are mine, and no one disrespects what is mine." He turned my head slowly, forcing me to look at him over my shoulder. Our faces were inches apart. His eyes were dilated, black pools of obsession. He wasn't looking at the target. He was looking at my mouth. The air in the basement was suddenly hot, suffocating. The gun in my hand was forgotten. There was only him. The way his thumb stroked my hip bone. The way his gaze dropped to my lips, hungry and terrifying. I waited for the kiss. I wanted it. I wanted the fire he promised. I leaned back into him, my breath hitching. For a second, he leaned in. I felt the ghost of his breath on my lips. Then, abruptly, he pulled away. The loss of his warmth was like a physical blow. I stumbled slightly, catching my balance. Lim stood a few feet away, adjusting his cuffs. His face was composed again, the mask back in place, though his chest was rising and falling slightly faster than usual. He took the gun from my trembling hand and placed it back on the table with a metallic clatter. "Keep that fire," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Hold on to it. Nurture it." He turned to walk toward the stairs, stopping at the first step. He looked back at me, his silhouette framed by the harsh light of the stairwell. "At the gala, you will not just stand there, Monica. You will burn him down, and I will watch." He turned and ascended the stairs, leaving me alone in the cold concrete room, my skin still burning where he had touched me. The dress was not a garment, it was a declaration of war. It was blood-red silk, a shade so deep and vibrant it seemed to pulse under the dim lights of the limousine. It was strapless, hugging every curve of my body like liquid armor, with a slit that ran dangerously high up my thigh. Around my neck sat the heavy diamond choker Lim had chosen, cold, brilliant, and worth more than the entire neighborhood I grew up in. I stared at my reflection in the darkened window of the Maybach. The girl who scrubbed floors in a polyester uniform was gone. The woman staring back was painted, polished, and terrifying. "You are shaking," Lim's voice came from the shadows beside me. I clenched my hands in my lap. "I'm nervous. Everyone will be there. The press. The board members. Aiden." Lim reached out. He didn't take my hand, he placed his palm flat against the nape of my neck. His skin was warm, his thumb resting against my pulse point. "Let them look," he murmured, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Tonight, you are not Monica Green, the struggling student. You are not a victim. You are my wife. And in this city, that makes you a queen." He leaned in closer, the scent of sandalwood and expensive scotch enveloping me. "Head up. Shoulders back. You own them." The car stopped. The door opened, The world exploded into a frenzy of flashing lights. The entrance to the Grand Sol Gala was a red carpet gauntlet. Hundreds of cameras flashed in a blinding staccato rhythm. Reporters shouted Lim's name, their voices overlapping in a chaotic roar. Lim stepped out first. He buttoned his tuxedo jacket, black velvet, impeccable, and turned to offer me his hand. I took it. I stepped out into the blinding light. For a second, the shouting intensified. Who is she? Look at the dress. Is that Lim Sung-won's date? I felt the urge to shrink, to hide behind his broad shoulders. But then I felt his grip tighten on my hand, a silent command. Stand tall. I lifted my chin. I let the cold mask I had practiced in the mirror slip into place. I walked beside the Shadow King, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look down at my feet. We entered the ballroom. If the lobby of the Grand Sol Hotel had been intimidating, this was otherworldly. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the gold-leafed ceiling. The room was a sea of black tuxedos and glittering gowns. A live orchestra played Debussy in the corner. The air smelled of champagne, heavy perfume, and old money. As we descended the grand staircase, a hush fell over the room. It started near the entrance and rippled outward, until the only sound was the clicking of my heels on the marble. Lim placed his hand on the small of my back, a possessive, claiming gesture. He guided me through the parting crowd like a shark cutting through a school of fish. People bowed. Men who ran billion-dollar conglomerates nodded respectfully at him and stared openly at me with a mix of curiosity and envy. Champagne, Lim said, snagging 2 flutes from a passing waiter. He handed me one. Stay here by the tower. I need to speak to Senator Kim. It will take 2 minutes. Don't leave me, I whispered, panic flaring. You are ready, he said, his eyes hard. Hold your ground. He turned and walked away, vanishing into a cluster of gray-haired men. I stood alone near the towering pyramid of crystal glasses, clutching the stem of my flute like a lifeline. I took a sip, the bubbles sharp on my tongue. I scanned the room, trying to look bored rather than terrified. Then, I saw him. Aiden was standing near the buffet, laughing loudly at something a young woman in a pink dress had said. He held a whiskey glass loosely in one hand, his face flushed with alcohol and arrogance. He looked exactly the same, handsome in a superficial way, smug and utterly oblivious. He turned to grab a canap, and his eyes swept over the room. They landed on the red dress. They traveled up to the diamonds. And then, they met my eyes. He froze. The canap dropped from his fingers. He blinked, shaking his head as if trying to clear a hallucination. He said something to the woman in pink, then began to walk toward me. His walk was unsteady, aggressive. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. Here it comes. Aiden stopped 3 feet away. He looked me up and down, his expression twisting from confusion to recognition and finally to sneering disbelief. Monica? He slurred slightly, his voice too loud for the polite atmosphere. What the hell is this? I took a slow breath. Hello, Aiden. He let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. No, seriously. What are you doing here? Did you sneak in? Is this some kind of joke? He stepped closer, invading my personal space. The smell of cheap whiskey on his breath made me nauseous. I am a guest, I said coldly. A guest? He scoffed, looking around to see if anyone was watching. Please. Look at you. You're wearing a costume. Who did you steal that dress from? Or did you find a really generous sponsor for the night? Lower your voice, I warned. Don't tell me what to do, he snapped, his face darkening. He reached out and grabbed my upper arm, his fingers digging into my flesh. You don't belong here, Monica. This is a gala for the elite, not for dropouts who scrub toilets. The orchestra seemed to fade into the background. People nearby were starting to turn. I saw the woman in pink watching with wide eyes. Let go of me, I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. "I'm doing you a favor," Aiden hissed, pulling me slightly. "I'm going to kick you out before security drags you out. You're embarrassing yourself." I tried to pull my arm back, but his grip was tight. I wasn't the weak girl anymore, but he was still stronger. "Security," Aiden shouted suddenly, waving his free hand. The music stopped. The chatter died instantly. Every head in the ballroom turned toward us. Aiden, emboldened by the attention, pointed a finger in my face. "Get this woman out of here," he yelled to a approaching security guard. "She's a fraud. She's a maid. She used to scrub my floors." The silence that followed was deafening. It was absolute. 1,000 eyes bore into me. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, the old shame trying to claw its way up my throat. Aiden was grinning, triumphant. He thought he had won. He thought he had exposed me. "She's nothing but a janitor." Aiden spat, laughing. "Check her purse. She probably stole the silverware. Remove your hand." The voice didn't come from the security guard. It came from behind Aiden. It was soft, calm, and terrifyingly deep. Aiden froze. The color drained from his face as a shadow fell over him. Lim Sung one stepped into the circle of light. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at the security guard. He looked only at Aiden's hand on my arm. Lim reached out. His movement was almost lazy. He wrapped his hand around Aiden's wrist and squeezed. There was a sickening crunch. Aiden shrieked, his knees buckling as he was forced to let go of me. Lim twisted the wrist, forcing Aiden down until he was bent over, wheezing in pain. I said. Lim spoke to the silent room, his voice projecting without effort. "Remove your hand from my wife." The collective gasp of the crowd sucked the air out of the room. "Wife." Aiden looked up, his face twisted in agony and shock. "Wife? Mr. Lim?" "What?" Lim released him with a shove, sending Aiden stumbling back into a waiter, sending a tray of drinks crashing to the floor. Lim stepped to my side. He slipped his arm around my waist, pulling me flush against him. He looked at the crowd, his gaze challenging anyone to speak. "You seem confused," Lim said, looking down at Aiden, who was cradling his broken wrist. "You called her a maid. You called her a janitor." Lim paused, letting the words hang in the air. "This is Mrs. Lim," he announced, his voice cold as ice. "She is the queen of this city, and she is the woman who now owns the building your little office is in." Aiden's eyes bulged. "What?" "I bought K-Tech this morning," Lim said casually, adjusting his cufflink. "Specifically, I bought the subsidiary you work for. Which means, Mr. Park, that the woman you just called a maid is actually your employer." Aiden looked at me. He looked at the red dress. He looked at the diamonds. He looked at the cold, hard eyes of the woman he had dumped for being poor. And as of this moment, Lim continued, a cruel smile touching his lips. "She has decided to liquidate your position. You're fired. And I will make sure you never work in this city again." Aiden opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at his fiancée, the woman in pink. She took one look at Lim, one look at the ruined Aiden, and turned her back, walking away into the crowd. He was alone, ruined, destroyed in front of the most powerful people in Seoul. Lim looked at me. He nodded once. "Finish him." I looked at Aiden. I remembered the rain. I remembered the bucket. I remembered the way he had tossed the crumpled bills into the dirty water. I took a step forward. The crowd held its breath. I raised my champagne flute to my lips and drained it in one long, elegant swallow. The bubbles tasted like victory. I lowered the glass. I held it out, letting it hover just above Aiden's trembling hands. He looked at it, confused. I let go. The crystal flute fell, shattering on the marble floor right between his feet. Shards of glass scattered over his polished shoes. I looked him dead in the eye. "Clean this up," I said, my voice steady and clear. "And try not to make a mess this time." I turned on my heel. the red silk swirling around my legs. Lim took my arm, and we walked away through the parting crowd, leaving Aiden Park standing in the wreckage of his life, staring at the broken glass at his feet. The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the east wing, turning the cold glass fortress into something almost warm. I sat at the breakfast island, nursing a cup of coffee. The silence of the house felt different today. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of a prison. It was peaceful. On the counter lay the morning papers. Every single front page featured the same image. Me, in the red dress, standing over a broken Aiden. The mystery queen of soul. Lim sung one's secret weapon. Does it taste sweet? I looked up. Lim was standing in the doorway. He was dressed for the office, immaculate in a navy suit, but his hair was slightly damp from the shower. He walked over, picked up the newspaper, and glanced at the photo of Aiden's terrified face. The victory, Lim clarified, leaning his hip against the marble counter. Does it taste as sweet as you imagined? I looked at the picture. I looked at the man who had destroyed my ex's life with a single sentence because he had insulted me. It feels... I hesitated. Final. Lim reached out, his fingers brushing a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His touch was gentle, a stark contrast to the violence he was capable of. Revenge is a meal that leaves you full but never nourished, he said softly, but it was necessary. The world now knows you belong to me. That is what matters. He lingered for a second, his thumb tracing my jawline. The air between us crackled, the memory of the almost kiss in the gym hanging heavy. I have a board meeting until 4, he said, pulling away reluctantly. Security is tight today. Stay inside. I will, I promised. He nodded, checked his watch, and walked out. I watched him go, realizing with a jolt of terror that the safety I felt wasn't coming from the walls or the guards. It was coming from him. And that was the most dangerous trap of all. 5 miles away, the sunlight didn't reach room 204 of the Starlight Motel. The curtains were drawn, yellowed with nicotine smoke. The room smelled of stale beer, mold, and failure. Aiden Park sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at the cracked screen of a cheap TV. Lim Sung-won and his stunning wife Monica Lim dazzled the... Aiden threw the empty whiskey bottle at the wall. It shattered, raining glass onto the stained carpet. Wife, he spat, his voice hoarse. She's a maid. She's a filthy little cleaner. He looked at his hands. His wrist was in a cheap brace from the ER. He had been fired, evicted from his penthouse. His fiancée had blocked his number. In 48 hours he had gone from a rising star to a pariah. And it was all her fault. He needed money. He needed a way out of the country before his debts caught up to him. He needed leverage. He dug his phone out of his pocket. He scrolled past the contacts who wouldn't answer. His boss. His friends. His parents. He stopped at a number he had saved years ago. A contact from the dark underbelly of the nightlife scene. A man who knew people who hated Lim Sung-won. He hit dial. Yeah? A rough voice answered. I have something for the Viper clan, Aiden whispered, his hand shaking. I have the Shadow King's weakness. The meeting took place in the back of a karaoke bar in Gangnam. The music was loud, thumping bass that vibrated in Aiden's teeth. Director Choi sat in a plush red leather booth. He was a small man with a scarred lip and eyes like a shark. He was the lieutenant of the Viper clan, the Ferrum Syndicate's only real rivals in Seoul. You're wasting my time, Choi said, lighting a cigarette. Lim Sung-won has no weaknesses. We've been trying to kill him for a decade. He has a wife, Aiden stammered. A contract wife, Choi dismissed. We know the rumors. He bought a pretty face to please the elders. If we take her, he'll just buy another one. No, Aiden leaned forward, desperation making him bold. You didn't see them at the gala. You didn't see how he looked at her. He broke my wrist just for touching her arm. Choi paused, the cigarette hovering halfway to his mouth. Go on. And she's not one of them, Aiden rushed on. She's not Mafia. She's a nobody. She loves her parents. She's a daddy's girl. That's how you get her. We can't breach the fortress, Choi said. It's a tank. You don't have to breach it, Aiden smiled, a twisted, ugly thing. You just have to invite her out. I know her trigger. Give me 10 million won and a ticket to Manila, and I'll give her to you. Choi studied him for a long moment. Then, he smiled, revealing gold-capped teeth. If she comes out, you get your money. If she stays inside, we skin you alive. It was 2 p.m. when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I was sketching in a notebook, trying to distract myself from the silence of the house. I picked up the phone, expecting a text from Lim. It was a message from Mom. Dad collapsed at the bakery. Heart attack. Ambulance taking him to Seoul General. Please come. Hurry. The world tilted on its axis. The pencil snapped in my hand. Dad, I gasped. Panic, cold and absolute, washed over me. I didn't think. I didn't analyze. I just reacted. My dad's heart. The surgery we had paid for. Had it failed? I ran into the hallway. Mr. Han. The head bodyguard wasn't there. He was with Lim at the board meeting. A junior security officer, a young man named Kim, stepped forward. Madam, is everything all right? My father, I choked out, grabbing my purse. I need to go to the hospital. Now. I need to clear this with Master Lim, Kim said, reaching for his earpiece. Protocol states. Protocol? I screamed, the fear making me irrational. My father is dying. We don't have time for protocol. Take me to the car. Kim hesitated. He saw the tears in my eyes, the sheer terror. He was young. He buckled. Okay, madam, let's go. I didn't wait for the convoy. I didn't wait for the armored SUV. We jumped into the smaller sedan parked at the front. Drive fast, I ordered. Kim peeled out of the driveway, the tires screeching. I clutched my phone, staring at the screen, praying for another update. I tried to call Mom, but it went to voicemail. I tried to call Lim. The number you have reached is currently busy. Pick up, I sobbed, dialing again. We were halfway to the hospital, speeding through an industrial underpass to beat the traffic. The shadows were long here, the concrete pillars blocking out the sun. Madam, Kim said, his voice changing. That van. What? I looked up. A black van had swerved in front of us, blocking the lane. Kim slammed on the brakes. The sedan fishtailed, tires smoking. Reverse. I yelled. Kim shifted gears, but another vehicle, a heavy truck, slammed into our rear bumper with a bone-jarring crunch. The car spun, crashing into the concrete divider. The airbag exploded in my face, filling the cabin with white dust and the smell of burning chemicals. My ears rang. I coughed, batting away the deflated bag. Kim? Kim was slumped over the wheel, blood trickling from his temple. Kim. The doors of the black van in front of us slid open. 4 men jumped out. They were wearing ski masks and holding crowbars. They weren't police. They weren't doctors. My phone buzzed again in my lap. I looked down through blurred vision. It was a text from an unknown number. Aiden sends his regards. I scrambled for the door lock, but it was too late. The glass of my window shattered, raining diamonds into my lap. A rough hand reached in, grabbing me by the hair. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the roar of the city above us. The trap had sprung, and the Shadow King was miles away. The board meeting ended with a handshake that was worth 4 billion won. I walked out of the conference room, the adrenaline of the deal already fading, my mind drifting to the dinner I had planned for tonight. Italian. Monica liked pasta. It was a simple thought, domestic and strange, but it made the corner of my mouth twitch upward. Mr. Han was waiting for me in the hallway. One look at his face, and the smile died. Han was a man who had stood beside me while bullets hit the car. He had cleaned up messes that would make a butcher vomit. He never flinched. But now his face was the color of ash. Sir, Han said, his voice cracking. Speak, I commanded, the cold dread pooling in my stomach. The East Wing reported an unauthorized exit. Officer Kim took the sedan. Madam. She received a text. Han swallowed hard. We tried to track the vehicle. The signal went dark 3 minutes ago under the Cheonho Bridge. He held out a tablet. It showed a grainy traffic cam feed. The sedan was spun out against a concrete divider, smoke billowing from the hood. A black van was speeding away. My world stopped. The noise of the office, the phones ringing, the chatter of the secretaries, it all vanished. There was only the image of that crushed car. Who? I asked. The word was barely a whisper, but it carried enough force to shatter the air. We intercepted a call from the registered owner of the van, Han said rapidly. It's a shell company linked to the Viper clan. But the tip? The intel came from a burner phone. Han hesitated. The voice print matches Aiden Park. The phone in my hand beeped. I looked down at it. A message from an unknown number. Aiden sends his regards. I didn't scream. I didn't yell. I simply squeezed my hand. The crunch of metal and glass was the only sound in the hallway as my smartphone folded in half, shards of screen digging into my palm. I didn't feel the cut. I didn't feel the blood. Find him, I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a grave. Incheon International Airport. Terminal 2. Aiden Park stood in the check-in line, his leg bouncing nervously. He checked his watch for the 10th time. He had his ticket. He had the envelope of cash Director Choi had thrown at him. He was 10 minutes away from security, and then he was gone. Boarding pass, sir? The attendant asked with a polite smile. Here, Aiden said, handing it over, his hands trembling. Mr. Park? Yes? There seems to be an issue with your ticket. Please step aside. What? No. I paid cash. It's first class. Aiden snapped, panic flaring. 2 men in dark suits stepped out from behind a pillar. They weren't airport security. Aiden recognized the ferrum pin on their lapels. He turned to run, but a hand clamped onto his shoulder like a vice. Mr. Lim would like a word, the man whispered. Aiden opened his mouth to scream for help, but a needle jabbed into his neck. His world went black before he hit the floor. Aiden woke up to the smell of gasoline and salt water. He was zip-tied to a chair in the back of a moving cargo van. It was dark, save for a single red light on the ceiling. A figure sat across from him in the shadows. You're awake, Lim Sung-won said. Aiden shrieked, thrashing against the ties. Please. Please. I didn't. They forced me. They said they'd kill me. Lim leaned forward. He was still wearing his suit trousers and white shirt, but the jacket was gone. He was rolling up his sleeves with slow, methodical precision. You sold my wife, Lim said softly. For what? A ticket to Manila? 10 million won? Aiden sobbed. I just wanted to leave. She ruined my life. She saved your life, Lim corrected. I was going to let you live in poverty. Now? Lim reached into a bag at his feet. He pulled out a combat knife. The blade caught the red light, glowing like a demon's eye. Where is she? Lim asked. The shipyard, Aiden blubbered, snot running down his face. Pier 4, storage container 702. The Viper clan? They have her. Pier 4, Lim repeated. He tapped the partition window. Han. Pier 4. The van accelerated. Lim looked back at Aiden. He stood up, towering over the bound man in the cramped space. You sold her for a plane ticket, Lim whispered, placing the tip of the knife against Aiden's knee. I will make you wish you had died in that crash. Aiden's scream was lost in the roar of the engine. The rain was coming down in sheets by the time we reached the Incheon docks. It hammered against the metal roofs of the shipping containers, a relentless drumbeat of war. The van skidded to a halt behind a stack of crates. Sir, Mr. Han said, handing me a Kevlar vest. Police are 5 minutes out. We should wait for the tactical team. I pushed the vest away. No police. I reached for the holster under the seat. I checked the magazine of the semi-automatic pistol. Full. I racked the slide. This isn't business, Han, I said, stepping out into the rain. This is personal. I moved toward the warehouse at Pier 4. I didn't run. I stalked. The rain soaked my white shirt instantly, making it cling to my skin, but I felt nothing. The only thing I could feel was the terrifying void where Monica used to be. 2 guards stood by the entrance, smoking cigarettes under the awning. I raised the gun. Pop. Pop. 2 silhouetted heads snapped back. They hit the wet pavement before they even heard the shots. I stepped over their bodies and entered the warehouse. It was a maze of rusted metal and shadows. Voices echoed from the upper catwalks. The Viper clan. Intruder. Someone shouted. Gunfire erupted from above. Bullets sparked against the concrete floor near my feet. I didn't flinch. I moved. I was a ghost in the machine. I ducked behind a forklift, firing 3 shots in rapid succession. A man on the catwalk fell, crashing through a wooden crate below. I moved forward, clearing the corners. A Viper thug rushed me with a machete. I sidestepped, caught his wrist, broke it with a sickening snap, and put a bullet in his chest. One by one. Systematically. Efficiently. I wasn't the CEO anymore. I wasn't the husband. I was the Shadow King. I was the monster they told stories about to scare their children. I reached the center of the warehouse. A heavy iron door stood at the end of a corridor, guarded by 3 men. I didn't slow down. I emptied the clip. 3 bodies dropped. I reloaded as I walked toward the door. My heart was hammering against my ribs, loud enough to drown out the gunfire. Please be alive. Please be alive. I reached the door. I didn't knock. I kicked it open with a force that bent the hinges. The room was a makeshift office, smelling of stale smoke and fear. And there she was. Monica was tied to a chair in the center of the room. Her hair was messy, her lip was cut, and her beautiful dress was torn. But she was alive. Her eyes were wide, filled with terror and relief. Lim, she screamed. I stepped into the room. My white shirt was stained red, not my blood. My face was wet with rain and sweat. I raised my gun. Drop it. A voice shrieked. Director Choi stood behind Monica. He had one arm wrapped around her throat, choking her. In his other hand, he held a revolver pressed hard against her temple. Take one more step, Lim, and I blow her brains out. Choi yelled, his voice trembling. He knew he was looking at death. I froze. The gun in my hand didn't waver. I looked at Monica. I saw the bruise on her cheek. The rage inside me didn't burn hot anymore. It went absolute zero. Let her go, I said. My voice was quiet. It was the sound of a tomb sealing shut. Back off. Choi pressed the gun harder into her skin. Monica whimpered. We stood there, a tableau of violence frozen in time. The dragon had found his treasure, but the blade was at her throat. The barrel of the revolver dug into my temple, a cold circle of death. The smell of Director Choi's sweat and fear was overpowering, mixing with the metallic tang of blood in the small office. Drop it. Choi screamed, his voice cracking. Drop it or I paint the wall with her. Lim stood 10 feet away. He was a statue carved from violence and rain. His chest heaved, his white shirt clinging to his skin, stained with the blood of the men he had walked through to get to me. His gun was raised, aimed directly at Choi's forehead. But he couldn't take the shot. Choi was using me as a human shield, his body tucked cowardly behind mine. I said, drop it. Choi shrieked, pressing the gun harder. I whimpered, the pain sharp and radiating. Lim's eyes met mine. For months I had seen him look cold, calculating, possessive and hungry, but I had never seen him look terrified. In that split second, the Shadow King was gone. There was only a man looking at the only thing in the world he couldn't bear to lose. Okay, Lim said. His voice was broken. Okay. He slowly lowered his hand. "Kneel," Choi commanded, a frantic grin spreading across his face. "On your knees, you son of a bitch. I want to see the great Lim Sung Wen beg." "No," I gasped, the word strangled by Choi's arm crushing my windpipe. "Lim, don't. He'll kill you." Lim didn't look at Choi. He looked only at me. "It's okay, Monica." He dropped his gun. It hit the concrete floor with a heavy clatter that echoed like a funeral bell. Then, Lim Sung-won, the man who knelt for no one, lowered himself to the dirty floor. He went down on one knee, raising his hands in surrender. "There," Lim said softly. "I'm down. Let her go." "Let her go?" Choi laughed, a high manic sound. "You think you get to walk away? I'm going to kill you both. But first I'm going to make you watch while I..." He shifted his weight. He was arrogant. He thought he had won. He loosened his grip on my neck just a fraction of an inch to get a better angle at Lim. In that microsecond, time seemed to slow down. I looked at Lim. He wasn't looking at Choi's gun. He was looking at my eyes. His gaze was intense, pleading. "Ground yourself," his voice echoed in my memory. "Feed the hate." I remembered the basement. I remembered the weight of the gun in my hand. I remembered him telling me that I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't a maid. I wasn't a damsel. I was the wife of a monster, and I had learned how to bite. I stopped crying. I planted my feet flat on the floor. I took a sharp breath. "Choi," I whispered. "Shut up, bitch," he hissed, leaning close to my ear. I slammed my head back. I put every ounce of my fear, my rage, and my strength into the motion. The back of my skull collided with Choi's nose with a sickening crunch. Pain exploded in my head, blinding white, but the sound of Choi screaming was worth it. His grip faltered. He stumbled back, blood spurting from his broken nose, the gun wavering away from my head. "Lim!" I screamed, throwing myself to the floor. Lim was already moving. He didn't stand up. He exploded forward from his kneeling position like a coiled spring. He didn't dive for his gun. He dove for Choi. He tackled the man into the metal desk. The impact shook the room. Choi fired a shot wildly into the ceiling, bang, but then Lim was on top of him. There was no technique. There was no grace. It was pure, primal butchery. Lim grabbed Choi's wrist and slammed it against the corner of the desk until the gun dropped. Then his hands went to Choi's throat. I squeezed my eyes shut. I heard sounds I never wanted to hear again. The struggle lasted 3 seconds. Then, there was a wet snap. And then, silence. The only sound was the rain hammering on the roof and my own ragged breathing. Monica. Lim was there. He was scrambling across the floor to me, his hands shaking. He wasn't the composed CEO. He was frantic. He pulled a knife from his boot and slashed the ropes binding my wrists and ankles. As soon as I was free, he dropped the knife and grabbed my face between his blood-stained hands. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice trembling. "Are you hurt? Did he shoot you?" "I'm okay," I sobbed, reaching up to grip his wrists. "I'm okay. My head hurts." He pulled me into his chest. He buried his face in my neck, and I felt him shudder. The man who terrified the entire city was shaking in my arms. "I thought I lost you," he whispered into my hair. "I thought I was too late." I pulled back slightly, looking at his face. He had a cut on his cheek, and his eyes were wild, dilated with adrenaline. "You dropped your gun," I said, wiping a smear of blood from his jaw. "You knelt for me. I would burn this city to ash for you," he said fiercely. "I would die for you." "You didn't have to." I managed a weak, watery smile. "I told you. I'm a fast learner." He stared at me, a mixture of awe and obsession burning in his dark eyes. Then, he crashed his lips against mine. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It tasted of copper and salt and desperation. It was a kiss that sealed a pact. We were survivors. We were killers. We belonged to each other in the dark. 6 months later, the automatic doors of the Grand Seoul Hotel slid open. The lobby was exactly as I remembered it. The high ceilings, the crystal chandeliers, the scent of lemon detergent. But everything else had changed. I wasn't wearing a uniform. I was wearing a cream cashmere coat over a silk dress, and on my finger the massive diamond ring caught the light. The staff was lined up in 2 perfect rows. They bowed deeply as we entered. "Welcome, Chairman Lim. Welcome, Madam Lim." I walked beside him, my hand tucked securely in the crook of his arm. We didn't stop at the front desk. We walked to the center of the lobby. I stopped at a specific patch of marble floor. I looked down. "This is where it happened," I said softly. Lim stopped beside me. He looked at the floor, then at me. Where he kicked the bucket? Yes. Aiden was gone. The trial had been short. The fraud charges Lim's lawyers had cooked up were extensive, but the prison sentence was the least of his worries. Aiden would survive in prison only as long as Lim allowed him to. I looked at the spot. I expected to feel anger, or triumph, or even pity, but I felt nothing. It was just a floor. It was just a memory of a girl who didn't exist anymore. Lim squeezed my hand. "Do you want us to remodel? We can rip out the marble, put in wood, gold, whatever you want." I looked up at him. The darkness was still there in his eyes, but it was tame now. It was guarding me, not hunting me. I looked back at the shiny, pristine floor. "No," I smiled, squeezing his hand back. "It's clean enough." I turned away from the past, looking toward the elevators that led to the penthouse suite, our suite. "Let's go home." Lim smiled, a real smile, and led me toward our future.
Hi, this was Last Collection. This was one of the best stories I've listened to. It was totally engaging and the pictures were fantastic. No ridiculous, snow or crazy random pictures or mini movies of people doing random stuff that have nothing to do with the story. I've subscribed and I'm looking forward to more of your stories. Thank you and keep it up.